May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. It is one of my distinct honors as a professor to be able to share with my students in days that matter. All the days of reading papers and listening to sermons, sometimes as a professor, you wonder, do people actually get it? But one of the interesting and beautiful things about the seminary experience is that something happens on that journey where the wheels start to spin in synchronicity, where they seem to work apart. So by the time that they get close to the doors upon leaving, we begin to see those flickering glimpses of the greatness that God has placed inside of them. So to be able to share with you all, Hines family, thank you for having me. Thank you for making this opportunity available to me, Bishop. Thank you for those who helped to make this possible. I am so very grateful. I will not belabor our time today, but I just wanted to say my brief thanks. I bring greetings from the Virginia Theological Seminary, where the very Reverend Ian Markham is the president and the dean. Dr. Markham sent me on an interesting journey the last few years in which our seminary turns 200 in 2023. This church and this diocese knows about long time and long ways to go as this structure and this diocese has continued on through the centuries. And so upon our 200th anniversary, which is in 2023, the dean asked me to preach 200 sermons leading up to our 200th anniversary. And so, pandemic aside, we're making good progress, even still, but this challenge has brought me to many places near and far, and to be able to see you all here makes this preaching opportunity worthwhile. For the time that's ours today, I'd like to share with you from a thought, from locomotion, from lamentation to locomotion, or shorthand, from woe to go. From woe to go. This text, strangely, brings me back to my childhood. My grandmother, who was an elementary school teacher for 35 years, insisted that I read books every single summer. So every summer I would read 100 or maybe 150 books a summer, hoping that I could get a chance to catch some of the summer sun before it sets on my childhood. One of the books that stood out to me had a young man in it by the name of Alexander. And Alexander was having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. It seems that somebody may have thumbed through that in their time. But Alexander was having a rough day. His brother was picking on him. School was not fun. He was having problems with the dentist, his mother, and himself. It seemed that upon waking up, he found himself in a perpetual sense of frustration, seeming as if the sun rose and his problem started and the moon rose and they may have subsided. But yes, Alexander found himself trying to make sense of this strange season in his life. And if I'm allowed to be honest with you, since we're all family nestled here together, I feel oftentimes like Alexander. Because when we look at our social, political situation, it seems as if we're living in a no good, very bad, horrible season of our own. It seems that we can't find peace on the left or on the right. Those who try to play the neutral role find themselves being pulled from side to side, from aisle to aisle, seeking to find the ways in which God is at work. And if we are not careful, the frustration that we feel living in these days will cause us to negate our responsibility as Christians. We will fall under the siege of hopelessness and despair. We will think that these times will be always. But I was sent here by way of airports and rental cars to tell you that God has something bigger for us than the things that we're experiencing. Yes, Alexander, your day may be terrible, horrible, no good, very bad. You may have lost your health care. You may have lost your job. You may have lost shards of your sanity. You may be wondering where the future is going and how you're going to get there. But one of the beautiful things that I love about this text is that there is woe in this text, but there's also go. There is lamentation, but there is also the opportunity for locomotion. We are not stuck in these situations, but we've been given the empowerment needed to turn them around. But it is difficult to imagine such good times. As Isaiah chapter 6 begins to roll, we find that the prophet is in a precarious predicament. This prophet, who prior to has had a pretty chill existence, but the political and social turmoil that's happening around him has nudged the divine urgency in him to the place in which he is at a crossroads in his life. He must now discern the will of God. Meanwhile, his homeland, frustrated. The land that he's prophesying to, frustrated. Foreign nations seeking to bring about impending destruction. Yet and still God decided to raise up a prophet, an unassuming prophet, to do the work of ministry in these times. Sister Donna, it would be negligible of me to tell you that ordination is the end. And I know you might wonder, why was God ordaining me in these crazy times? But my sister, I came to tell you that ordination is a divine call to turn woe into go. We don't have the option to do that when we have taken the stole and we've taken our vows. We promise God that even when we don't feel like hope and we don't feel like good news, we have promised God. We have promised God in the sight of those who have given their life essence to make us who we are, so that we can give our best to this world. So whether you're watching at home, in your car, sitting here with us now, it's important for us to know that our Christian hope is dependent upon us dealing with our woes. And my sister, my brother, it is okay for us to woe. Woe in the Hebrew speaks to lamentation. It speaks to allowing us to feel the weight of God's heaviness. God was disappointed with Israel. God was disappointed with Judah. But the lamentation that Isaiah felt was because he felt the heaviness of God in the world that he lived in. Oh, I'm scared for clergy who don't feel the woe of preaching in America. While there are people who are making record profits, there are people who are finding themselves in record numbers of homelessness. So we break records one way and then we break them the other way. Meanwhile, all this record breaking seems to be breaking God's heart. And where is the prophet who will say, woe unto those who scatter the sheep? Where are those who are to say, God has more for us to do than just continuing to count our nickels and dimes and count our days as they cascade off the calendar and they roll into oblivion? No, not at all. But if we don't deal with the lamentation that is in our midst, we can never produce the locomotion that is needed to move our country and our world and the Christian body along. So, Donna, we're sending you into a world that needs you. A world that is suited for your taste, suited for your talent, suited for your struggle. Because we have not learned yet to cry. Therefore, we have not quite learned how to live. So there is this impending sense of woe that is in Isaiah's spirit. Woe because the king has died. There's political instability. Woe also because after seeing this cosmic, this celestial, this imaginative, orgasmic, intellectual experience, he's able to see God a little different. And by seeing God a little different, it's amazing what that did for his soul. Now, it's good to be able to say that I see God, but what does seeing God do for me in the way that I live? Isaiah's first inclination was, woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips. I have my own personal problems that keep me from seeing the fullness of what God is trying to do. I need not rattle off the list of personal problems, or your list may be as long as mine. But what I do know is this, that those personal problems did not exclude Isaiah, but they actually included him to do the work. So while some people find every excuse and every reason not to give God their best, God is saying, I need someone who is willing to lay it all out there so that I can do a mighty work in them, with them, and through them. Yet, the temptation for us today is to continue to be middle class, mediocre, and lukewarm. How can this transformation from woe to go happen if we don't address that? But as we notice this shift in the text, we see something interesting happen. He says, woe unto me, I am a man of unclean lips, but I also have a social commentary. Don't tell anybody, but the Bible is actually political, believe it or not. There are empires and kings and wars and all this kind of interesting political stuff. But that's for another day. What makes a strong prophet and what makes a great priest is understanding the context for where one does the work. Oh, Norfolk, it's an interesting place to do the work. A city that seeks to find itself in transformation as 2025 approaches. Plans for casinos, plans for redevelopment, plans for this area to step into the next phase of the future. But it can't step into the next phase of the future if the churches don't undergird, support, and also critique that work. Because while we find ourselves innovating for the future, seeking to make something that's inclusive for all, if the church finds itself sitting on its hands and biting its lip, the future will not reflect the kingdom of God. So, woe is me, I'm undone. Woe is me, the people I'm around are pretty woeful too. But the beautiful thing about this text is that he was able to have this transformation from woe to go, but it was not initiated by him. You are sitting in this seat because that transformation was not initiated by you. God in eternity past thought about how could he be a blessing to this area. God said, how can I bring change through someone who seems so unassuming? Someone who talks softly but carries a big stick. Someone who's full of wisdom, full of laughs, but also full of strength. How can I be a blessing to this diocese? How can I change the trajectory of the Christian church? Well, it starts by you, my sister. The Lord thought about you way back to bring you here right now so that the future can be what he wants. So you have been invited into this work of committing ourselves to the locomotion of the kingdom. So in the 15th year, we find ourselves thinking about what does it mean, the 20th year, 21st year, what does it mean to live in the 21st century? What does it mean for us to be faithful to our task? What does it mean to think deeply about our call? Isaiah was able to turn this around because he was touched on his lips with a hot coal, and this coal helped to purify him for the work. This purification process was not just of the tongue, it was of the heart and the mind. For in Proverbs it says, out of the overflowing of the heart, the mouth speaks. It talks about how there is connection between the imagination, the heart, and the mouth. So being touched on the mouth was a source that turned the regenerative processes around so that this prophet who found himself ineligible understood that he was selected by God for the work. As I take my seat, I want to say to you that when God said, who will go for us? This prophet who saw his fair share of woe, saw people dying rioting in the streets, saw instability on the borders of his nation. He saw the ways in which the poor were being treated and saw the ways in which the religious officials were being corrupt in their givings and their takings. We see that Isaiah understands these things, yet he says, God, send me. I'll go. I don't know where go means. I don't know what go pays. I don't know what go promised me. I don't know how long go is. But what I do know is that I cannot be stuck in woe when God has given me go. I can't be stuck waiting on things to change when God has touched me and touched you to turn this whole thing around. The beautiful thing about this, my sister and my brother, is that when we go into the world to try to change them, to go from woe to go, we don't go empty-handed. We don't go with promises only. We bring something with us in our satchel. We bring a little something with us. The gospel text says that Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Those who come unto me will not go hungry. Jesus places us at the forefront of the reimagination of the world. And we are not left to go empty-handed, but we're to go, breaking this bread everywhere that we go. This is our task. We do this because the Lord has already given us so much. Donna, God bless you. May God's blessings continue to shine upon you. Well, I pray that we will support her and support clergy in general as they try to weather these difficult times. And take this with you. The hymn writer said that kings and kingdoms shall all pass away, but there's something about the name of Jesus. Take that name with you.